Two things happened to me in the last week and a bit, which have made a substantial impression upon me. The first was a chance conversation at last Saturday's Zoom coffee morning, when one of our number, a retired meteorologist, was asked about his work. The conversation developed as these things often do, and he was asked about climate change and its effect on our planet. There was no doubt, he said, that climate change is happening, and unless we do something about it now, it will be too late. We may nearly be at the point of no return. The other was preparing for this service. As I said at the beginning, Christian Aid have focused on climate change this year and on its effect for all the people across the world. And they had produced a veritable mountain of resources. It wasn't possible for me to use everything in this morning's service, but I did check everything out. And one of the links that they suggested was to a recording of a 13-year-old Canadian student addressing the 1992 Earth Summit in Rio. Her name was Seven Cullis Suzuki, and she pleaded in impassioned terms for the world leaders to wake up and smell the coffee, to acknowledge that there was a need for change and that it needed to happen now. She spoke of the effect that humanity was having on the rest of the world, rainforests being destroyed, wildlife habitats disappearing, extinction of species on a daily basis, pollution of the planet, global warming. All of it could be laid at our feet. Only we who have caused it can change it. She was warmly applauded. Although the clip was 8.5 minutes long, I contemplated showing it today in its entirety. But then I realised Seven had delivered her passionate speech 29 years ago. This young prophetess had warned the world leaders gathered for that Earth Summit nearly 3 decades ago. She repeatedly said in her speech, "I am only a child, but..." Well, she's not a child anymore. And what has changed? The applause has long since died away, and any changes made to safeguard and repair our planet have been too few and had too little impact. 3 years ago, another young prophetess shot to eminence. You'll know her. Her name is Greta Thunberg. And this intense teenager has been warning all who will listen that the time for action is now. There can be no more delay. I watched a clip of her speaking at the United Nations Climate Action Summit 2019, held in New York. She was only 16 at the time, but she spoke knowledgeably and fiercely. She was angry with us, the adults, because we are letting down her generation and future generations. We, here today, probably won't be alive when the worst effects of climate change take their toll, but our children and our grandchildren will be. What will happen to them? What will happen to this beautiful planet? Can the harm we've done be undone? Can the effects of global warming, of plastic waste, of pollution, of greedily consuming the Earth's resources and not replenishing them be halted? Can this runaway train to destruction be put in reverse? I don't know the answer, but I know we cannot just stand by and do nothing. And so do Christian Aid, because they see the effect on the poorest and most vulnerable peoples in the world. And they include in their material the following quote by Catalina de Harvey-Williams, a theologian writing from Australia and the Pacific Islands. Only the willingly ignorant would continue to deny the link between our consumerist lifestyles, climate change, and suffering in the developing world. Promoting economic growth as the answer to all our problems, and in particular global poverty, is irresponsible. We need to recognise that our current growth-orientated system is driven by powerful economic interests set on making profits, however short-term. And it is just plain wrong to ignore the suffering of the poorest and most vulnerable populations in the world, especially when they are the least contributors to climate change. It's not easy to preach on this subject. We don't want to hear this message. It frightens us. We want to believe it's been overhyped. Most of all, we're concerned because what it asks of humanity seems too big a task for us as individuals to influence in any meaningful way. What is the point, we ask, of doing our own little bit if across the world there are big companies, even whole nations, who don't seem to have climate change on their agenda? And what's it got to do with the Bible anyway? Well, that's where our Bible readings come in. Of course, there's no mention of climate change in the Bible. It wasn't an issue in Old Testament times or even in Jesus' day. There were far human beings on the planet then, and the technologies that have since been invented would come at a much later date. People lived in harmony with their environment. That was just how life was. But there are loads of passages throughout the Bible that celebrate the beauty of this earth. Many of the Psalms, including the one that we heard at the beginning of our service, sing praise to the Creator God who made it. Right back in Genesis, God commanded us as human beings to steward the earth, to look after its resources, to farm it, not to squander and abuse it, but to treasure it. And then we have our passage from John's Gospel, whose overriding message is about loving one another, just as Jesus has loved us. And when we love one another in the Jesus way, the self-sacrificing, putting others first kind of way, then we look out for them. If what we are doing, directly or indirectly, is harming them, then we change. We heard earlier that bit from 19-year-old Glory from the Philippines, whose short piece spoke of the impact of climate change, which she can see and experience in her island. And in our Christian Aid video, we saw and heard how difficult Florence's life in Kenya was until Christian Aid built a dam and the water changed everything for her. Still, the drought in Kenya continues. Do you know it's been going since 2016? Whilst Florence is clearly a woman with the joy of Christ imbued in her whole being, still she worries for and weeps over those others she knows are struggling. Will we cry with her? Will we demonstrate the wisdom that Glory believes we have to distinguish right from wrong and act accordingly? If you, like I, feel overwhelmed at the thought of what that might entail, then take comfort from these words of Mother Teresa's. This wasn't about climate change, it was about love, but it works the same. We cannot all do great things, but we can all do small things with great love. And that's what Jesus asks of us, to love one another in whatever ways we can. We affirmed these words earlier, but I'm going to finish by repeating them. Because we are God's people, we will care for each other. Because we are part of God's creation, we will care for the earth. Because we are loved by God, we will share God's love with everyone. May God give us the will the knowledge, the power, and the compassion to do just that. Amen.